Imagine serving your country for months, maybe years, only to return home and discover that the one place you thought was safe, the home you fought to protect, has been sold without your permission. Not stolen, not robbed, sold. And the people responsible? They had no idea what was coming next. Before we dive into this unbelievable true story, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and comment respect for every soldier who comes home to battles they never expected. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole had spent the last 12 months in a desert half a world away. The days were long, the nights were louder than sleep, and every sunrise reminded him of the peace waiting back home, the little blue-trimmed house on Willow Creek Road. It wasn't just a house. It was the place he rebuilt his life in after the Army reshaped him. Most soldiers dream of stepping off the plane and seeing family. Ethan dreamed of walking through his front door, setting his bags down and breathing in the scent of home, old pine floors, coffee grounds, and quiet. But that dream shattered the moment he reached his driveway. The grass was trimmed, the mailbox was new, and two strangers were unloading furniture from a moving truck. A woman with auburn hair stood on his porch holding a ring of keys that didn't belong to her. His keys, his door, his house. Ethan's boots stopped on the sidewalk. His heart didn't. At first he assumed it was a mistake. Wrong address, wrong street, anything. But Willow Creek Road was unmistakable. He had memorized every crack in the pavement that led him home. When the man from the truck noticed him standing there, he waved politely as if Ethan were some neighbor walking by. Then the words came. "Can we help you?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yeah. You can tell me why you're moving into my house." The woman stepped forward, holding a folder that looked suspiciously like legal documents. "Sir, we purchased this property 3 weeks ago. It was listed as vacant and abandoned." Ethan's breath left his chest like someone had punched him. Abandoned? Vacant. His home? His deployment papers clearly protected his property. His mortgage was auto-paid. His documents were secure. Nothing made sense. And as the new owners exchanged uncertain glances, Ethan felt the heat rising behind his eyes. Not just anger, but something deeper. Betrayal. Someone had taken advantage of his absence. Someone who knew he couldn't fight back. But what the town didn't know, not yet, was that Ethan Cole had never retreated from a battle in his life. And this one was about to make headlines. When Staff Sergeant Michael Hayes stepped out of the taxi, boots sinking into the familiar gravel of Maple Ridge Lane, he expected relief to wash over him. After 12 months in the scorching heat of deployment, all he wanted was the quiet comfort of his own front porch, the faded rocking chair, the small flag he left fluttering by the mailbox, the place he called home long before he ever wore a uniform. But the moment he lifted his duffel bag and looked ahead, his chest tightened. The house didn't look right. Gone was the old wooden fence he had repaired himself. Gone were the rose bushes his mother planted when she visited. Gone was the welcome mat he'd kept for years, the one with a worn-out American flag printed across the top. Instead, a polished black SUV stood in the driveway. A newer white mailbox bore a stranger's name. And on the front porch, children's bicycles. For a moment, he thought he had made a mistake. Maybe the cab driver took a wrong turn. Maybe deployment had blurred his memory more than he realized. But then he saw it. A single carving he had made years ago, still etched into the mailbox post. MH, his initials. His pulse hammered. This was his home. His sanctuary. The one place the Army promised would be waiting when he returned. So why was a stranger's car parked in his driveway? He approached the house slowly, his heartbeat loud in his ears. The front door opened before he could knock. A woman in her early 30s appeared, holding a laundry basket. Confusion spreading across her face as she looked at him. "Can I help you?" she asked. Michael swallowed hard. I live here," he said, his voice cracking from exhaustion and disbelief. "This is my house." The woman blinked, stunned. "No, this house was sold 3 months ago. My family bought it from the HOA." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Sold? While he was deployed? Before Michael could answer, a tall man stepped onto the porch behind her, the husband. He looked wary, protective. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Michael shook his head slowly. There's no misunderstanding. I deployed last year. The HOA was supposed to maintain my property until I returned. They can't legally sell my home, not without notifying me. But the husband's face fell with uncomfortable sympathy. Look, I don't know what happened before we arrived. All we know is the HOA said the owner abandoned the property. It was listed and we bought it. Abandoned. The word made Michael feel sick. His house sold behind his back. While he was serving the country, he felt something dark rise in his chest. Not anger, but something deeper. Betrayal. He stepped back from the porch, gripping his duffel so tightly his knuckles whitened. The woman looked at him with genuine worry. I'm so sorry, truly. Maybe you should speak to the HOA president. He comes by in the evenings sometimes. Michael forced a tight, respectful nod. Thank you. He turned away, but as he walked down the driveway, he glanced back one last time. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, was peeking at him from behind the curtain. Her small face filled with the kind of innocence that didn't understand the conflict unfolding. And for the first time since he got home, Michael realized this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. This was going to be a fight, a real one. Not with weapons, but with truth, law, and the determination of a soldier who refused to be walked over. And the HOA, they had no idea what was coming for them. When the dust settled outside the house, James wasn't any closer to answers. The new owner remained inside. The neighbors whispered behind half-closed windows, and the entire street felt like a battlefield without bullets, only silence, tension, and unspoken truths. But James wasn't a man who backed down when things got confusing. He had stepped into war zones with nothing but discipline and instinct. Compared to that, uncovering what happened to his house, he knew he could handle it. Still, the situation felt wrong. Too wrong. He drove straight to the county records office, faster than his mind could process the betrayal. Every mile felt heavier. Every memory of the home, his mother's laughter, his father's old workbench, his childhood drawings still stuck, inside a closet, pushed him forward like a silent command. When he arrived, the clerk looked up with the polite, practiced smile of someone who had repeated the same greeting 1,000 times. How can I help you today, sir? James placed his deployment papers, ID, and a copy of his property deed on the counter. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. Years of military training had taught him better. I need to know, he said steadily, why my house was sold while I was deployed. The clerk's smile dissolved. She typed his address into the system, and her eyes widened. Oh my God. James leaned forward slowly. What do you see? The clerk swallowed, then turned the monitor slightly, not enough for him to see, but enough to show the situation wasn't normal. It says here the property was marked as abandoned and placed into a delinquent sale. James blinked once. Abandoned? I was in Afghanistan. Yes, sir, I see that now. But there's a note attached. She clicked the file open, her eyebrows rising higher with every line she read. It claims you were not reachable, and the HOA filed multiple complaints about the property being neglected and empty for too long. James exhaled slowly. The HOA filed this? She nodded. And it looks like the man who bought your house is actually the HOA president's cousin. James felt a coldness wash over him, not fear, not anger, but clarity. A soldier knows when something is coincidence, and when it's a setup. Who authorized the sale? He asked. The clerk hesitated, then pointed to a name on the screen. It wasn't a judge. It wasn't a bank. It wasn't even a proper city official. It was a private signature. A forged one. This wasn't legal, the clerk whispered, finally looking directly at him. I'm so sorry. Someone targeted your property, and they knew exactly what they were doing. For the first time since returning home, James felt something burn inside him, not rage, but purpose. He had fought enemies overseas. Now he realized he'd come home to fight a different kind of enemy. Corruption. He stood tall, thanked the clerk, and walked out with printed documents in hand. Proof. Signatures, dates, everything. He wasn't just going to fight for his home. He was going to expose the entire scheme. The investigation begins. James drove straight to his old friend and attorney, Marcus Reed, a former Marine turned aggressive civil rights lawyer. If there was anyone who could take down corruption in a small town, it was Marcus. When Marcus saw James walk in, covered in exhaustion and holding a stack of papers. He didn't ask a single question. "Tell me everything." James did, from the moment he returned home to the moment he discovered the forged documents. Marcus didn't blink. "They used your deployment. They exploited the service members. Civil Relief Act. They filed fraudulent complaints. They manipulated county loopholes. And worst of all," he tossed the papers down, "they sold your house to family." He pointed toward the door. "James, this isn't just illegal. It's criminal." James nodded once. "I want everything exposed." Marcus smiled, slow, confident, the kind of smile only a man who smelled a victory could give. "Then we're going to make this the biggest fight this town has ever seen." The community starts talking. News spread faster than wildfire. A soldier returns home. A home stolen while he served. A shady HOA involved. A forged signature. People whispered at the grocery store, the gas station, the church parking lot. Some neighbors who once avoided eye contact were suddenly knocking on James's car window, apologizing, sharing what they knew, admitting they had seen things but didn't want trouble. James didn't blame them. Not everyone was built for confrontation, but he was. And now he wasn't alone. One neighbor, an older woman named Linda, stepped forward with something big. A folder of HOA meeting notes, ones the president had hidden from homeowners. Another neighbor brought doorbell camera footage of men entering James's yard during deployment. Piece by piece, the truth formed a picture. A conspiracy, a cover-up, a deliberate scheme to take advantage of a soldier's absence. And James was done being quiet. A town on edge. By the end of the week, several things were crystal clear. The HOA president orchestrated the sale. The new homeowner was in on it. Officials were bribed or intimidated. Multiple signatures were forged. And James's military deployment was exploited as a sale opportunity. The town was buzzing. Support was building. The HOA's power was cracking. But James wasn't satisfied with whispers or sympathy. Part 4 wouldn't be a quiet chapter. It would be a confrontation, public, loud, and unstoppable. Because James wasn't just reclaiming his home. He was about to make sure no soldier in America ever faced this nightmare again. When the sun rose the next morning, the small town of Willow Creek was already buzzing. News traveled faster than wildfire here, and by breakfast time, everyone had heard the same unbelievable story. A soldier returned home, and someone else was living in his house. Some residents were furious. Others were confused. But everyone had an opinion. And suddenly, the town wasn't split down the middle. It was pulled into a storm. The side of the soldier. Early that morning, neighbors who had known Daniel since he was a boy gathered outside his old home. They brought signs, coffee, and a fierce determination that surprised even him. One elderly neighbor spoke first. "That boy fought for this country. He bled for it. And now he's being told he doesn't own his home? Not in my lifetime." Local teenagers made posters. Veterans from neighboring towns began arriving one by one, standing shoulder to shoulder with Daniel in quiet solidarity. It wasn't a protest. It was a family defending one of its own. The HOA's panic. Inside the HOA boardroom, chaos reigned. They had never expected the truth to come out, and certainly not this fast. Their inboxes were overflowing. Their phones rang endlessly. And now, the whole town was outside demanding answers. The board president was sweating. We didn't know he was deployed," he insisted, even though the documents clearly said otherwise. Someone else muttered, "He has proof, doesn't he?" This could turn into a federal case. Fear replaced arrogance. Self-preservation replaced authority. The cracks in their story were widening. The new homeowners start to realize the truth. Meanwhile, inside the house, the new homeowners, the Barnetts, were staring nervously out the window at the growing crowd. They weren't bad people. They had simply bought the property the HOA told them was foreclosed. But now the truth was catching up. Mrs. Barnett whispered, "Honey, if that paperwork was forged, we could be in serious trouble." Her husband, pale and shaken, didn't respond. They finally understood. They hadn't bought a home. They had walked into a storm created by someone else's greed. Daniel makes his move. But Daniel wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was focused. Very focused. He walked up to the crowd and raised a hand for silence. The entire street fell quiet, waiting. His voice was steady. "I'm not here to cause trouble. he said. "I just want what's mine. What I fought to protect, my home." The crowd erupted in applause, loud, proud, unstoppable. It wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about justice. It was about fairness. It was about honoring someone who had risked everything for the country he loved. Daniel turned toward the HOA president and said calmly, "I'll give you one chance to make this right." The town watches, the showdown. The HOA board gathered nervously on the lawn, surrounded by cameras, neighbors, and veterans. There was no more hiding behind legal jargon, no more pretending, no more excuses. For the first time since this battle began, they were afraid. Daniel looked each board member in the eye. "What you did wasn't a mistake," he said. "It was a choice." The atmosphere was electric. The tension was sharp. The town held its breath. The HOA president swallowed hard. He knew Daniel wasn't bluffing. He knew the law, the real law, was on the soldiers' side. He finally whispered, "Let's talk." And at that moment, the entire town knew justice was coming, whether the HOA liked it or not. The courtroom grew still. Not the kind of silence you get when people are bored, but the kind that falls over a room when everyone senses history unfolding. James Walker stood tall, maybe not as strong as he had been before deployment, maybe still carrying the shadows of war, but strong in a way that frightened people who had tried to destroy him. Linda and Tom Turner, the couple who bought James's home illegally, kept their eyes glued to the floor. The HOA president, Mr. Carver, sat stiff in his seat, trembling like a man waiting to hear a prison sentence. Judge Ramirez took a breath, and finally she spoke. "This court rules in favor of Staff Sergeant James Walker. The sale of the property is hereby invalid. The deed reverts immediately to its rightful owner." A wave of emotion washed over the room. Gasps, whispers, relief spreading like warmth through the veteran's chest. But the judge wasn't finished. "Additionally," she continued, "the HOA acted unlawfully. They violated federal protections for deployed service members. They lied, they profited, they knowingly caused harm." James felt the room lean in. "Therefore," the judge said, "the HOA is ordered to pay damages, legal fees, and civil penalties. The Turners will vacate the home immediately, and Mr. Carver, you are removed from the HOA board effective today." Shock rippled through the courtroom. Mr. Carver sagged in his chair. The Turners started crying. A neighbor covered her mouth in disbelief. "And James?" James simply closed his eyes. Not in celebration, not in revenge, but in finally feeling like the country he served had not forgotten him. The walk back home. Word traveled fast. Small towns work like that. By the time James stepped out of the courthouse, a crowd had gathered outside. Not reporters, not protesters. His neighbors. The same neighbors who once avoided eye contact. The same people who doubted him. The same ones who assumed the HOA was always right. They were all waiting. A man stepped forward, someone James barely recognized. "Sergeant Walker, we're sorry, all of us. We should have stood up for you." A woman nodded. "We let the HOA bully us for years. You were the first person to fight back." James didn't know what to say. Then someone did something that broke the tension entirely. A kid, not older than 10, held out a small American flag and said, "Sir, welcome home." James's throat tightened. He took the flag, put a hand on the boy's shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you. That means more than you know." The final showdown. The next morning, James returned to his house, his real home. The one he'd bought with deployment pay. The one he dreamed of during long, silent nights overseas. The Turners were moving out. They didn't look angry anymore. Just embarrassed. The husband approached James slowly. "Look, we didn't know the HOA stole your house. They told us you missed payments, that you abandoned the property. We were wrong to believe them." "I'm sorry." James studied the man for a long second. Then he nodded. Not because he forgave them entirely, not because the pain was gone, but because growing bitterness would only destroy him, not them. "Take care," James finally said. "Next time, ask questions." A town transformed. The HOA board was dismantled within weeks. New leadership stepped in. People who valued fairness, not power. They rewrote the rules. They apologized publicly. They even invited James to speak at the community meeting. At first, he refused. But then he realized something. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about making sure this never happened to another soldier, another family, another neighbor. So he stood before the newly elected board. The townspeople gathered around him and said, "A community isn't defined by rules. It's defined by people. You don't protect a neighborhood by bullying it. You protect it by standing up for one another." The room erupted in applause. And just like that, the story of the man who fought back spread far beyond the town. Veterans groups shared it. Legal advocates shared it. Even national media ran the headline. "Soldier returns home to find his house sold and teaches a town what honor really means." A new beginning. James finally moved back in. Same walls, same floors, same porch where he once dreamed of peace. But now, the house felt different. It felt earned, protected, respected. And every morning, when he sat outside with a cup of coffee, neighbors waved warmly. Children rode bicycles past his yard. People stopped to thank him, not just for his military service, but for his courage right here at home. Because in the end, James didn't just win back his house. He reclaimed his dignity, restored a community, and reminded a whole town what integrity looks like. And sometimes, that takes more bravery than war itself.